Hello and welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Jasmine Lee. The U.S. China trade war is reaching a boiling point, posing a serious threat to global trade and economic stability. In response to President Trump's 145% on tariffs on Chinese goods, Beijing has struck back, imposing retaliatory duties of up to 125% on American goods, halting deliveries of new Boeing aircraft, and suspending purchases of U.S.-made aviation components. Just as the situation seems to be worsening, U.S. President Donald Trump, he made a statement claiming he was confident a deal could be reached within 3 weeks. But how realistic is that timeline? Our guests are here to help us unpack the latest developments in the increasingly tense U.S.-China trade war. Join us today are Tso Chen-dong, National Taiwan University Political Science Professor, former Kuomintang Mainland Affairs Department Director, Taiwan-China Relations Expert, and Stephen Tan, International Advisory Group Managing Director. A very warm welcome to both of you on the show. So let's talk about the latest developments. And Trump said that China has reached out to U.S. multiple times and that a trade deal could be signed within 3 to 4 weeks. He also hinted that he may consider lowering some of the tariffs. So Professor Tso, could you help us to first understand, so for President Trump, what are the ultimate goals of the trade war with China?
I think first of all, we need to understand that the ultimate drive for President Trump's trade policy is economic gain for the United States. Yeah, so for that to materialize, he emphasized on tariff, which could be reaped to contribute to U.S. Government revenue. As many people know that for many years, the U.S. government has suffered from budget deficit, a fiscal deficit, and the U.S. also has suffered from a trade deficit. This double deficit has drawn up U.S. Revenue, either both government and private, for quite a long time. And that's why from time to time, U.S. government face the threat of being shut down when it is unable to pay off its debt. Yeah, so, and that's why I think Trump needs to extract those revenue from the tariff initiative.
So Professor Tso mentioned about the trade deficit that Trump hoping to resolve through the economic gain. Stephen, do you agree with that? And also because some people are suggesting that Trump also wanted to reindustrialize the U.S. So what do you think about the ultimate goals of this trade war with China?
Well, reciprocal tariffs is something that's both a policy goal and also a way to try to strike deals with other countries. I think it serves multiple purposes from Trump's perspective. Now, collecting revenues to make up the shortfalls of the upcoming corporate tax cut extension is critically important, but trying from Trump's perspective to make some sense out of a fair trade, not letting other countries take advantage of the U.S., again, from Trump's perspective, is also equally important. Now, there are two groups of the countries that the United States has to be dealing with: China and ex-China. Now, ex-China, that's ongoing. This week in Washington, Trump's administration is in the process of negotiating with both Japan and Korea. And Vice President J.D. Vance is in India. I don't think he is there in real substantive negotiation, but at least in formality, it's in the process. Australia and England, that's relatively straightforward because there are no trade deficit. It's actually trade balance from the U.S. perspective. So what we'll be really looking at is the ongoing negotiation process of Japan and Korea. And then, getting back to your question, Jasmine, is, whether or not there will be some signals from China or from Washington that the real negotiation between the biggest two countries in the world could start, and if so, when, and also how. And this is a very tricky question, because if you ask me at this moment, I think both sides have extended some olive branches. But the problem is that the branch is so tiny that it's not enough to strike the deal or to strike the momentum that both sides were getting closer. So I think it's too far away from getting into any, not necessarily substantive negotiations, but even the procedure, touch, I think it's still far away. We'll be looking at whether or not, when Xi Jinping comes back from Moscow in early to mid-May, whether there will be not necessarily a special envoy from the U.S., but maybe one of the best Gulfies of President Trump to make a personal trip to Beijing to see whether or not this would happen at that moment, and to see whether or not the real, sensible, possible negotiations could get started from them. But until then, I don't see a clear prospect of having a face-to-face bilateral trade negotiations between Washington and Beijing.
Stephen, you mentioned about fair trade earlier, and for Trump, his definition to fair trade is a little bit different from other people. His definition of fair trade is exactly the balance sheets have to be no surplus, no deficit. So Professor Tso, could you help us to understand, Stephen, he said he doesn't think that in the near future we'll be seeing the two leaders to have a negotiation. And what's your take on that? And when we're seeing that Trump had this sudden softened stances, what is the driving reason? What's the reason driving behind it?
Okay, let me answer your question respectively. First of all, when the two sides can have a face-to-face meeting, when the two sides can come to the table to have a substantive negotiation, first of all, I think for Xi Jinping, he has already, his team has already suggested two things as a precondition, or as their expectation for a possible high-level meeting. One is that there must be a substantive agreement to be reached.
Yeah.
And secondly, Xi Jinping himself shall be respected. I think they are very worried about the scenario that we see in the end of February, when Donald Trump had a meeting with Ukrainian President Zelensky. So I think China doesn't want that to happen to its president Xi Jinping. And secondly, why Trump seems to retreat from its tougher stance earlier. I think first of all, he has to face the fact that the Wall Street is very unhappy with him.
Yes.
And the stock market and the financial market in general are facing a turbulent time. Some would say this is one of the most turbulent time in a decade. And that could hurt some of his personal allies. That could also hurt people who vote for him. So that's the first thing. Secondly, the factional reshuffle around him.
Yes.
Yeah, Peter Navarro used to be the advocate for everything tariff.
Yes.
Tariff on everything. But now Navarro seems to be taking the blame because those who are surrounding Trump arguing that he caused the chaotic situation, so he has to to be kept away. And so now we see the Treasury Secretary and also the Commerce Secretary, they join force to persuade President Trump to withdraw from his earlier stance. And also we see that many factory owners and many company owners here, many company owners in United States cry out for their suffering. Yeah, and these are not gigantic companies, not big firms, but
Also
small and
small,
medium-sized firms. They could not sustain that loss, and they could not manufacture themselves in United States, and that's why they import things from China, and they suffer the most.
Professor Tso, you mentioned about Trump and Xi Jinping, they need to be seen as respected. So, Stephen, could you help us to share your view with us? How would you describe the leadership styles of the two leaders, and what kind of image they are trying to build in front of the global audience?
Okay, well, obviously, President Trump has his own style that's demonstrated to the whole world, including Chinese.
Yes.
That he likes to have the personal one-on-one relationship among the leaders of the world. He likes to talk to President Xi himself. He likes to strike the deals with him. But then, of course, if you look at the styles of the CCP or Beijing, China has every reason to have a calculated process and result, to have a point person, to have a prep meeting, to have a reasonable expectation of the process and the outcome of the negotiations. Anything short of that will be devastating, will be to the detriment of CCP and its regime, particularly in this critical moment where rumors have been spreading around recently about how Xi is in full control of the party and how party is in reasonable control of the society. Now, with that, anything short of a full respect, as Professor Tso pointed out correctly, with Xi's counterpart in the U.S., would be a big catastrophe for Xi and China. And I don't think China can afford to have that. Now, with Trump, it has a different aspect of the concerns. On one hand, I think Trump is not shy away of expressing his desire to have a meeting and strike the deals and so on and so forth. But then the problem is how to get started. Now, so I think both have concerns and have a sense of urgency, considering that in the United States you have a reasonable expectation on the inflation and possible recession. If you look at the numbers, which are the prior numbers, all the indicators that CPI, PPI, all the numbers, they're all good. They're all good. But then Fed still refused to drop down the rate, cited the concern of the possible recession and the inflation, or possibly combination of both. And the reason behind that is truly the expectation, the market's expectation that it will go down that way. Now, that's the sense of urgency from President Trump's perspective. But if you look at China from Xi's perspective, it has a similar but different sets of problems. Chinese economy is going down. The current tariff regime is basically effective decoupling, at least trade decoupling for the moment. There will be no actually bilateral trades between China and U.S. because of the tariffs at the movement. And then the situation in China is not doing well. So, and on top of that, there's some CCP political control issue and Xi's legitimate issues. And adding all that, you see the very tricky situation where both sides will have imperative incentives to make some sense out of it, to talk to each other. But both sides, neither of them can do it. Why? because as I pointed out, that the olive branches are not just big enough for the other party, the other side, to pick it up.
Do you think there will be a branches big enough in the future?
I hope so. I think there will be, but I think you just have to wait until some major events happen. For example, Xi just returned from Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
There will be a big CCP political bureau meeting next week. On May 9th, Xi Jinping, upon acceptance of the invitation of Putin, will be visiting Moscow. For all those major big events, once you pass that, I think Washington will be on a wait-and-see mode to see whether there will be some real sensible branches, for both sides to pick up.
So
a special envoy or
wait.
Personal trip, that kind of things, we may be seeing that sometime later in the month of May, but not in April.
Okay, that's it. Thank you for providing this timeline. And I think as the trade war between the two worlds' biggest, largest economies continue to unfold, everybody is asking the same question. Who holds the upper hand at the negotiation table? Professor Tso, what's your opinion on this?
I would say China probably has held an upper hand because of the difference in political system.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why? Because American
It's a democracy.
is still a democracy.
Yeah.
It's still a democracy. So it has to handle people's dissatisfaction.
Yes.
And it has to persuade every member in Congress to pass laws. But that kind of pressure is not so much in China at the moment. Yeah, I would not say that the Chinese population has doesn't have any say in the in the policy making process, but the impact is different.
Yes,
is sharply different. Yeah, so. Yeah.
Stephen, do you agree with that? The China holds the upper hand at the negotiation table?
I don't necessarily think that China is at the upper hand, but I don't think the U.S. is at the upper hand either. I think it all boils down to the question of how you will be able to let the other side declare some small wins, small victories, where you will still be able to strike the deal to your benefit. Now this is tricky because President Trump wants to declare victories.
Yes.
There are a variety of ways for Trump to do that, but China has to have certain degree of tolerance in allowing President Trump to declare victories. Vice versa, Xi Jinping would need to have something so that he can turn it inwards to its people, 1.4 billion people that, we have successfully made the deals to protect the interests of our country, so on and so forth. And Washington has to a certain degree, recognizes that. Now, this is tricky, but this is very, very important, but it's difficult task. I don't know who, but the problem here is that there are not enough effective dialogues and constructive dialogues between the two sides so as to get two sides closer. Now, the two sides are drifting far, far away as we speak. Who and how would anybody on any side or both sides will be able to try to bring it closer would be a critical issue of concern. And this is something that we're closely monitoring as we speak. So I don't know who's there's no winner or loser. I don't think there is somebody is at the upper hand or somebody's underdog, but we'll have to wait and see how it evolves. As I just pointed out, both sides have their problems, concerns, and the issues of urgency that need to deal with. But timing is the enemy. The timing is really bad. When we get into the month of May, it will be escalated. It will not be better. It will be getting worse. But hopefully there will be something out of it next month.
And let's take into other account, on April 15th, Bloomberg reported that Beijing ordered its national airlines to suspend aircraft deliveries from U.S. manufacturers, Boeing, and to halt all purchases of aircraft-related parts and equipment from the U.S. Suppliers. And 2 days after, on April 17th, the Trump administration announced it would begin imposing port fees starting in 180 days on vessels either built in China or operated by Chinese companies. And these fees are set to rise gradually over the next 3 years. So, Professor Tso, could you help us to understand, let's talk about the Beijing move first, and could you help us to understand what's your take on the Beijing's move to halt the purchasing U.S. aircraft aviation components?
Yeah, first of all, because Boeing is the largest exporter to China from the United States. So definitely it is most vulnerable to any turbulence in U.S.-China trade relation. And China definitely grasped that part and to impose pressure on Boeing. And also, Boeing has faced a series of questions with regard to the stability of certain types of its aircraft in the last several years. So Boeing is very nervous about any turbulence, any new interference in its commercial transactions. So I think China, the move China takes is really having an impact on Boeing and the United States. However, we also need to understand that this is a double-edged sword.
Yes.
Yeah, because China is currently developing its domestically manufactured commercial aircraft. Yeah, and that venture requires input of critical technology from the United States. So if American government does the same, such as imposing export control on those technological input, the Chinese plan to develop its domestic commercial aircraft could also be interrupted. And also, this commercial plan that China is currently developing is hoping to get certified in U.S. certification system. And that could also face uncertain impact from the U.S. federal government.
So we may also see a backfire on their own economy, and as this trade war continue to evolve, we probably will see more of this when I'm trying to, this kind of retaliatory or this kind of approach would have their backfire on both U.S. and China's their own economy. And Stephen, I want to ask about the port fee, because some of the analysts, they are saying this is one of the toughest maritime sanction policy to date. And so how significantly will this port fee policy impact China?
I think it will have a substantial impact, not just on China, but on the shipping cost around the world. Trump put a lot of emphasis on the shipbuilding capacity domestically, and it also involves as one of the negotiation issues between U.S. and South Korea. Now, imposing a port fee or another way of tariffs or dues in the time horizon is try to prevent the Chinese or reduce the Chinese shipbuilding capacity in that sense. But I would say that this is one of the things that that the U.S. is accumulating the self-initiated bargaining chips. You see, when you face or before you getting to the negotiation table with the other sides, both sides tend to accumulate self-initiated bargaining chips.
Yes.
125% tariff from Chinese perspective, 145% from U.S., and then U.S. say port fees, China say Boeing hold back, and China say, we want respect, And the rumors are saying that we also want to talk about Taiwan. U.S. doesn't want to talk about Taiwan issue with China at this moment, at least not at this moment. But then both sides are trying to build it up, something that when it comes to the real negotiation to exchange for. If you don't have enough in your inventory to exchange for, then it will be tough or even tougher at a negotiation table. If you ask me, Jasmine, this is exactly what both U.S. and China have been doing as we speak. Boeing hold back, China's going to release it. Once and if you strike the deal. Same thing. Well, TikTok is another perfect example, right? From Chinese perspective. Port fee, I would say that it will de-escalate once and if both sides will have a real chance to strike the deal. And I'll be optimistic as well on the TikTok and on other similar issues, including the tariff rate. But the true question is that it's hard in the near term for both sides to sit down to get close to strike the deal. If it's possible that many of the issues that we talked about will at least be de-escalated, if not necessarily totally removed.
We're probably going to see more, but probably in the near future, we are not going to see a negotiation soon. So we will definitely continue to monitor the development, and thank you both for your great insights. If you liked our show, please search for us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up, and hit subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching our show today. Stay safe and see you next time.